Hey everybody, just wanted to bring up something really quick before we get started with today's episode of Pull Focus. Towards the end of the episode, the last 5 minutes or so, we ran into some technical difficulties. We were still recording and we were able to clean up most of it, but you may hear some abnormalities in regards to that last little bit. But don't worry, you can still hear everybody pretty clearly, and I think we do a pretty good job of ending on a good note. In the meantime, please again, let us know how we're doing. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pull Focus Podcast with special guest Gabe Spencer as we talk about Tenet. Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pull Focus, the cinema-based entertainment podcast where a couple of freelancers come together to talk shop. My name is Mike, and as always, I am joined by my brother in crime, a man who lives by a certain code, whose entropy is a weapon all of its own, a man who's got my back, whether I'm stepping backwards into the future or running headlong forward into the past. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Andrus.
Oh, thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. It's okay. You can sit down. Enough of the applause. Okay, really, today it's okay. Sit down. It's not about me.
So many people. So many people. So many COVID tests. It's ridiculous. Guys, we also have a special guest on today's episode of Pull Focus, and Andrus and I are both so very, very happy to have him. A very well-rounded professional, an individual who cut his teeth here locally in Utah at the legendary Brigham Young University Fine Arts Institute, and also doing an incredible job cutting his teeth as technical director of the local famous production of Studio C, and then catapulting into recurring roles on network television and major cinema, few and far between. A master of improv and death by broadsword. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gabe Spencer.
Whoa! Yeah. So wow, that was fantastic. I love that.
I'm glad you liked it. Glad you liked it, Gabe. So yeah,
thanks for joining us, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you so very much for being here, especially when it comes to the title that we're talking about with this episode, Gabe. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Why don't we jump in really quick, Bill? When it comes to introductions and that kind of stuff, you're an associate of Andrus. You guys have worked together on a number of productions, and luckily enough, you were kind enough to give us your time on the episode today. I was jumping back into your filmography, taking a look at a couple things, and I was just so happy to see that, like Andrus, you are what I call an actor's actor, for lack of a better term. I mean, it's a situation here where I can tell just by looking at your background on IMDb and also some other social sources that we're able to grab, that you've been working hard, man. You've been working hard for a number of years. Could you maybe give us an idea of your history with this? I mean, you went to BYU, you learned the craft here locally in Utah, and then you spanned out proof that when you learn how to get this stuff down, put your head down and work hard, that good things can happen. What was your experience? I mean, I know I'm talking about over a decade's worth of experience here, but would you be able to share with us a little bit, people who are in the game locally, what it took for you to, get the resume that you got and what you had to do?
That's a really great question. Wow. Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn early on is when you're working in the film industry, television industry,
Sure.
whatever, whether you're on crew or whether you are acting, one of the biggest lessons I learned is it's all about momentum, because you can book an amazing role on some network television thing,
Yeah.
but if that's it's going to end at some point, and then what's next, right?
Great question.
It's all about your next production. It's all about what are you working on when you're already working. Because I can't tell you how dumb I feel when it's cool, I'm on this awesome thing for the summer, I'm working on a movie, and then the movie ends and it's shoot, I haven't done any prep work for after this movie ends.
You got to do your homework.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the biggest lesson that I've learned, especially coming out, moving from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles, is it's really about that momentum and continuing working on your next project while you're already having success, so that you don't end up, dry, which is, it's easier said than done, especially with, the last year of COVID and everybody being quarantined and nothing happening for a good chunk of the summer and stuff.
Yeah, that's the truth.
But the principle still applies in terms of, you just got to keep it you got to keep it going. You're only as good as your last film is something I've heard a lot in this industry. So
I think that especially like when we're dealing with the slowdown that you mentioned, I mean, like as the date of this recording, we are still dealing with, the year of COVID. We're moving into like 2021 now, and definitely there have to be some compromises, but there absolutely have to be some new rules in the game, some new hurdles to jump. Andrus has been kind enough to provide me some information in regards to how busy things are still going hard in the Salt Lake City circuit. How is it like when it comes to somebody who's like on the West Coast now, dealing with like you're changing areas, different laws come into play? How? I mean, I know it might be like kind of a dumb question, but how has COVID changed the aspect of being an actor permanently, do you think, going forward?
Ooh, permanently. That's a good question. I think it's still changing because
Sure.
I mean, first of all, I want to say how incredibly lucky I feel to be in an industry that isn't shut down right now.
For real, yeah.
Considering however many other industries in our economy that are shut down, it's amazing to me that Hollywood has still made it work, especially in LA where lockdowns are so prevalent.
Right.
And it's amazing how much money is going into it just to make it work. Like COVID tests are $120 to $200 each. And
It's
when I'm
intense.
working on a big budget film here in Los Angeles, I'll take a COVID test, 2 rapid tests every other day just to stay on set.
Jeez, and you could lose your job if in case like you argued about it, or maybe you missed the testing window or something like that.
Oh, they wouldn't even hesitate. Like it's not worth it. I was on a set last month. Don't Worry, Darling. Olivia Wilde is directing this movie.
Awesome.
And day 2 of a full week of filming, one of the cast or one of the background actors got COVID, and it shut down for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then they opened up for another week, and then one of the stunt guys got COVID, and it shut down for another 2 weeks.
See, that's really refreshing to me, because I'm glad to see it isn't just like the center cast that is judged in regards to that, because people can't afford to do that. I mean, if Crafty, everybody means everybody. If Crafty or like second PA or something ends up getting sick, then that slows down the entire production. I think that's a responsible thing to do, regardless of the fact that it might kind of be challenging when it comes to that momentum aspect that you were just talking about before.
Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely I don't know what's going to be permanent, because I imagine as soon as the lockdown shut down, it's just so it's so costly to have so many people testing constantly every single day. That you just and then I know of network TV shows that are quarantining their actors and their crew for weeks before they even get on set, and they're just
healthy,
sitting in a hotel room 24/7. Just like waiting to work in 2 weeks. Like it's crazy, but it's so expensive. So I don't imagine many of the quarantine and COVID procedures will continue once the lockdowns are over and things like that, which I'm also looking forward to, because it sucks wearing a KN95 mask all day.
for sure. Especially when you're doing stunt work. I imagine when the heart's beating, it can be a little bit hard after a shot where you have to immediately put the mask on and hope for the best. One thing,
but I mean that's nothing to be said for all the healthcare workers and everybody that has to wear a mask in whatever job they're doing. But it's difficult all around for sure.
Absolutely. One thing that I do happen to ask when we have like a guest here, especially somebody who is specialized when it comes to being not only in front of the camera but behind it as well, as you are, is the way in which things are different when it comes to the local scene here in Salt Lake and the way in which things are different in Los Angeles. Obviously, LA is the center. They have so much capability, and God bless them for doing it. Centuries of film and cinema coming out of there, but I always like to toot my own horn and say that Salt Lake City and the surrounding area in Utah here, it offers, a diverse amount of people, diverse geography. Why do you think, well, I don't know, I'm not saying that you think this, I apologize, but I always offer this question. Why isn't there, keeping in consideration there is a lot of film and cinema coming out of here, why isn't there more? When we look at the surrounding area, we have mountains, we have rivers, we have the salt flats, we have capable, talented people in production studios. What do you think is the biggest thing in your experience of us not being as big as Los Angeles when it comes from production schedules and projects and that kind of thing?
I think one of the biggest things is the tax incentives that Utah offers, which have kind of been slowly getting chipped away more and more, or grabbed up by, you know, huge productions like Disney or things like that. And then the regular productions that are still, you know, big budget shows, they're not as motivated to come into Utah to film, which is super unfortunate, because there is like there's something different about working with crew, especially in Utah,
sure,
as opposed to Los Angeles, where, you know, you're working with so and so who's like 40 years and hates the last 20 years of his job or something.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's definitely something to be said for the amount of quality of people and work that goes into the Utah film market.
Right.
I count my blessings that I started out in Utah, because I think it's an amazing place to film, and especially for an actor like me to start out and get some really awesome credits under my belt in terms of crew and acting, and then to go out to other places that it's transferable in that way.
I think that's probably something that's really necessary with people who want to be professional actors nowadays as well. You can't just know how to memorize a script. You have to know how to use Pro Tools. You have to know what it's like to be behind camera. You need proper etiquette when it comes to fighting tech and that kind of stuff. Is that something that you would really kind of push forward for people who might be listening who, you know, have that same dream? I mean, is it more important to be well-rounded than to be specialized in one particular facet of the whole machine? Absolutely.
That is something that I keep seeing, especially when it comes to auditions in Los Angeles for actors, is like there are tons of terrible actors in LA, and they're going to get work no matter what. Like, there's just terrible people that it's like, hey, you're beautiful. We're just going to have you say one line, but we're going to give you this huge role or whatever, right?
Sure.
It doesn't matter. Like, and then there's really great actors, like some of the best actors that I know that are hardly getting any work at all. And that's just how it goes. But I think that one of the biggest things you can do is hone in your hobbies, hone in the things that you are good at, that make you different, or that make you stand out. Rather than stand out in a crowd of 200, the odds are against you. Try to stand out in a crowd of 50. Right? What makes you unique?
Nice.
Or whatever.
You know, I've never heard it pushed in that way before. That's actually a really good way to think about it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, one of the earliest things that I had to learn when I came out here in early 2019 was that I needed to be different from this like small, narrow category of people, as opposed to like, I'm just going to go for whatever. And so I started going out for more cop roles, more soldier roles. I got an authentic LAPD uniform from a cop buddy who retired that fits me. And like, you know, like it's all about diversifying, like what makes you different when they say like, I need, you know, this type of person, like, oh, I have this set of skills, or I have this hobby that applies to it, or whatever. And then it's not enough to say that you have to have footage of it.
Oh, of course.
You have to have like it's so stupid. It's like, oh, we need you in this movie, but like we need you to submit a video of you playing tennis. And it's like, who records themselves playing tennis? Like, but now I have recording of myself.
Yeah.
I have recording of myself playing tennis. You know, because I missed that opportunity. So it's having those like diversified things, and then on top of that, recording yourself for when that opportunity comes.
Well,
I'll tell you, it's better to do it now than the 15-year-old footage of you playing tennis when you were 12, right?
Yeah, that is true.
So, I don't know. If I got a good headshot, I would still hand it out nowadays. I mean it, no question.
No.
Well, I really appreciate the refreshing look and that honesty in regards to that, Gabe. I think that it's so important to keep in mind that if you do want to be an actor, you can't just be an actor. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world, and you better be willing to diversify and also specialize at the same time if you want to keep the ball rolling and keep the momentum going, like what you mentioned before. So I really do appreciate that. One of the things, too, that we have to keep in mind when it comes to certain technicalities and focuses, and also just irreverent questions that come about, I think you're probably the perfect person to talk about when it comes to today's episode and the movie that we're going to be talking about today, especially seeing as you have real life experience on the set itself, and I can't wait to go back in time and, well, no, I'm not going to say that metaphor. That's not good. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about Tenet.
All I have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors, some of the wrong ones, too. Use it carefully.
To do what I do, I need some idea of the threat we face.
As I understand it, we're trying to prevent World War III.
I'm not saying Armageddon here.
No. Something worse.
I gather you have an interest in a certain Russian national.
Mike's bring me in.
You really want to know? He can communicate with the future.
Time travel.
No. Inversion.
Aim it and pull the trigger. You're not shooting the bullet, you're catching it.
Whoa. Well, I've seen too much. Well, we'll try and keep up.
Your duty transcends national interests. This is about survival.
Seems bold.
Bold, I'm fine with. I thought you were going to say nuts.
This is where our worlds collide.
How would you like to die?
Old.
You chose the wrong profession.
Well, that's from here.
Hasn't happened yet.
There are people in the future who need us. Who need Tenet.
We need to save them here and now.
This reversing the flow of time. Doesn't us being here now mean it never happened? You want to crash a plane?
But not from the air. No, it's so dramatic.
Well, how big a plane?
That part is a little dramatic.
And so that was Tenet, everybody. The preview, I mean...
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Can we play that in reverse and then forward, then reverse, then forward, then
How dare you?
Side down and around and backwards. Sorry. What?
You know what?
I apologize.
You know what? You're joking, but this...
I'm not apologetic at all.
This technical miracle, Andrus, this absolute black hole of so much. I mean, there's...
Black hole?
God, there's so much.
What are you talking about?
Well, like it's
Interstellar.
Yeah. No, oh, that's right. Oh, that's the wrong one. Well, I mean, I have to keep in mind, like, I sometimes when I see something this complicated, I lose my memory, and then I have to. That's memento. That's not going to work
What's complicated about it?
Nothing at all. Everything's fine. No, of course, we're talking about Tenet, everybody. This is the what was supposed to be, and actually in some ways really was, a blockbuster of 2020. This is a film directed by the now legendary Christopher Nolan, one of our favorite directors here on the show. But we'll see if, after talking about this film, if that still remains true. Probably will. But anyway, from the IMDb synopsis, armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world, a protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time. I mean, that encapsulates the entire movie. But if only it was just as simple to put forth a very complicated idea in this movie as easy as it was to put in that synopsis on IMDb. I mean, this thing was all over the place. We have this great story structure where we have the protagonist played wonderfully by a Mr. John David Washington of KKK Klansman fame, and also wonderful retinue when it comes to his father's work, Denzel Washington, and just the kind of legacy that he represents. John does an incredible job playing the unnamed protagonist very well, and we have this capability here of seeing what it's like when you have a production here where the main point of the film is to keep people guessing. We have a story structure in which a bad guy in the future is sending specialized inverted weapons into the past to wage a war against the present. That's really what it is. I'm not making this up. I couldn't make this up. And luckily enough, we have Gabe in here today, who was kind enough to give us his time, who also worked as I don't know, what would be the appropriate, not stunt coordinator, but definitely a stunt man on some of the scenes that we're working on here in Tenet, Gabe. Is that correct?
Official title is specialized stunts.
Excellent. So how is that different from some of the other work that you've done in the past? I mean, you're not sitting up here in front of a camera reading lines. You're jumping over barrels. You're using fake gunshots. You're rolling around. What was the day like when you went through and recorded your scenes here for Tenet?
I mean, I before we even get to the day, we had gone through a whole process of rehearsals, of trainings, of auditions, in a sense, that was beyond anything I'd ever experienced or had any idea.
How was it different? How was it different?
Well, I mean, first of all, when I went out for this to audition for this film, it was untitled WB feature film. That's all I knew about.
Oh man, it was secret. Awesome.
Very secretive. We didn't even know it was an audition, to be honest. It was like, okay, show up. We're gonna do some stunts. And it was 8 hours. It was an 8-hour day, and they did a bunch of like random training. They taught us like some hand-to-hand combat things, some like fire team training, for about 4 hours. And then the next 4 hours was seeing how we could do everything in reverse. And granted, we had no idea what Tenet was or what anything was going on. And so this was one of the weirdest things. And then eventually I got called on to set, and I realized that out of the 30 or 40 people that I was on that day with, only 7 of us made it in.
Oh my gosh, man. Top of the world. I mean, what does that mean to you when like you actually get like the meta behind it, where you find out, hey, there were over 36 people who we were looking at. You're one of them that we want in the scene. How does that make you feel, especially like on a Chris Nolan film? That's got to be ridiculous.
I mean, it blew my mind because, like I said, we didn't know what film it was. I'd heard of Tenet on like the rumors of that's what Chris Nolan is working on. That's what the next thing is going to be. And it wasn't until the very end when the guys came in to like, I guess, audition us or judge us or determine who it was, that somebody said, my job is to make you as perfect as possible for Mr. Nolan. And I like, my heart skipped and I looked around and nobody else was freaking out. And I'm like, did anyone just hear what I just heard?
That's crazy. So that's crazy.
Yeah, and that's when I realized it was Tenet and it was going to be in reverse and everything, and everything clicked at that moment. But it was life changing to get on set and see that, like, oh, it wasn't everybody there. Like there was only 7 other people that I recognized.
I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for you. What an opportunity. And I mean, honestly, that's just so very cool. And it wouldn't have happened if you weren't, you didn't have the capability to do it. So kudos to you, my friend. Excellent work. I think that one thing that we have to do prior to going forward and, moving forward like the discussion is let everybody, it's like warn everybody first.
Spoiler alerts. Spoiler alerts.
If you have not seen this movie, turn off this podcast. We have a member of the crew, the cast, the team that made this movie possible, and we're going to just ask him so many questions, and we're also going to spoil this movie specifically for you guys so that you know what's going on behind the scenes and get, the most important part, our opinions. That's what you guys are waiting for, I know. But I can't bury the lead too much. But if you haven't seen this movie, turn off the podcast and come back.
Now that you've done the spoiler, let's just get right into this.
Okay, let's do it. So the reason as to why Gabe is talking about, wow, I had to do this in reverse, is because the way in which the story and the technical, like just the cinematography of this movie intertwine. Tenet is this really cool experiment, this really cool science fiction movie in which, like I mentioned before, there is a bad guy, there's an army, whatever, in the past that wants to in the future that wants to wage war on the present by taking these special weapons that can actually be manipulated through their entropy. All the physics majors out there can email me, let me know what that means. But that's also why I mentioned like black hole too, in regards to the Nolan reference. Anyway, what these weapons have the capability of doing in the proper hands of people who can concentrate enough, I guess, is kind of do like this cool trick where they rewind their placement in time. I know it sounds complicated. That's why I have to watch the movie. But because of these weapons being inverted and also people being inverted in the flow of time, that gives them certain capabilities. And overall, what we see developing is this very intricate, very well-weaved storyline that's actually not fully fleshed out until you see the cinematography being pushed up against you. Because like Gabe was talking about, the film tricks that are used here are actually pretty old school. You have reversals and things moving forward in time happening at the same time in the scene. In order to do that, one would have to first film people doing something in reverse, and then reversing that and putting it into the timeline of the movie digitally, and then laying on. Yeah, so it's complicated. Trying to describe it.
You said a spoiler warning, but like you could spoil this movie and people would have no idea.
That's the beauty of Nolan, right? That's the beauty of it. You're absolutely right. It's this weird situation where we have ultimately people and objects in this movie moving forward in time from our perspective, but then we also see them moving backwards in time against time from their perspective, which can be very, very confusing.
It's an action movie.
Yeah, but it's a great action movie.
And we open up some really cool people.
It's amazing. We open up with a scene where the first thing you see is the protagonist, again, played by John David Washington, keeping terrorists from blowing up an opera. I mean, I'm not making this up. It's the first 5 minutes of the film, and it's done and filmed brilliantly. Over time, the protagonist, with help from different characters that come into play, they let him know that he's going to be teaming up with Robert Pattinson, who plays Neil, his cohort on this entire adventure. And over time, they're actually going to fight time against a number of individuals who are going to try and end the world. So when we think about the way in which this movie encapsulates not only a very complicated story structure, but also technically amazing, but a very complicated way in which it moves in to support the narrative, people get lost along the way. Did either of you guys happen to just say to yourself, what happened? And maybe the first half an hour into the film, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to watch this at least 6 more times in order to really get it. Did that hit you guys as hard as it hit me?
I will answer that question for you.
Okay.
It affected everybody, like everybody in the world, everybody that has seen this, it affected them. Unless they actually know the science and they're a student of science.
No idea.
I'm saying the person that wrote it was the one that directed it, and I don't know if he has a degree in the science. However, he knew the story from beginning to end and backwards and forwards and upside down and roundabout. So he knew what was going on. However, nobody else on the planet knew because they are told they need to go back and rewatch it.
Exactly. I mean, that's one thing.
And rewatch it
over and over again. I think it was kind of
rewatch it by the end. I'm sorry. That was just perfect timing. Well done.
Very good. Very good. I think that's something that probably says to there's been a lot of people who said, and Nolan can be quoted in regards to this, he didn't like the idea of this movie being seen in anything but the big screen. And
which makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely, especially after seeing it. And unfortunately,
in IMAX, he actually uses the IMAX cameras to film. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, then it definitely had a point of design. And unfortunately, Tenet was released during when COVID was just beginning to hit, and I wasn't able to see it in the big screen. I had it in the luxury of my living room, but once I was finished watching it, it clicked for me, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand why he was being so aggressive when it came to it. Not to say that Chris Nolan was being a jerk or anything like that. He had a vision, and he wanted to make sure that it was interpreted in a certain way. Unfortunately, for the majority of people who saw this movie, that didn't happen. But I can understand as to why it did get that tag of being the blockbuster of 2020, and why the studio and why he also fought so hard to put it on the big screen.
It makes perfect sense. So.
Well, it's like this thing where part of me was saying to myself before I watched Tenet, I was saying to myself, oh, Chris Nolan, why are you being such a jerk? We're dealing with a lot. Don't try and be so aggressive about telling people to come to the movie theaters. But I'll admit, after seeing it, I was like, okay, I can understand. There's a lot riding on this. I wouldn't have gone and see it in public, but I can understand as to why he had a passionate kind of push in regards to this in the studio they're in. It really can't be enjoyed, I don't think, as big as it could be, unless, of course, you see it in a big theater. And you can't say that for every production. I mean, honestly, The Dark Knight, I like it in a big theater, but I like it just as well as I do in my living room. And this movie was definitely technically spec'd so that people would get a big, large experience. When we think about that experience, though, and this is something that I'd really like to get your opinion on, Gabe, this movie had so many moving parts, more so, I think, than a a lot of productions that I've seen in my experience. And that then speaks to the amount of people that had to put in really good, hard work in order to make it happen. Who do you think, in your experience on set and like seeing how the movie has, come out in production, who do you think are some of the unknown, unsung heroes that were in the background that made this movie a possibility?
In terms of crew, or in terms of like some of the smaller actors? Or
Great question. In terms of crew first, I'd like to just hear your opinion about that, because I think that's probably, people don't know exactly how many people it takes to move this ship. And I think that you probably have a better idea in regards to that.
5,287 people times 5.
Is that from?
That's wow. How many people are on? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
You're killing me. You're killing me. I was taking you seriously.
I mean, it's just when you sign on to do a Christopher Nolan movie, you are signing on to something that in a unique way, it sort of reflects his own filmmaking. Because if you think about the way that Chris Nolan directs and creates his movies, like he doesn't necessarily wait for the audience to get to speed. Like you are just
that's so true. That's
like
so
he grabs you by the shirt and pulls you through the movie, and you're trying to like gather everything. More so in Tenet than any other film. But
absolutely, I completely agree with you. Completely.
Yeah, in many of his films, and it's the same on set as well.
That's interesting.
He loves working 16-hour days.
Yeah.
He'll look at a schedule.
Loves it.
He loves it. He'll look at a schedule and he'll be like, "No, I can shave 3 days off of that. Let's do 6."
I love it.
And it's just wild. We got called on to set 3 days before we were supposed to, and there were about like 150 of us that were just like, "Hey, can you get on the bus tomorrow at 8?" when it was 6 o'clock the night before.
Crazy.
So like I think one of the biggest things, the unsung heroes in this movie are those like the producers, who like everyone who organized and
for sure. Production coordination in and of itself must have been mammoth in this whole thing.
Oh my goodness, because it's Chris Nolan. He's like, "I want this," and they're like, "Cool," and then they just scurry to make it happen.
Right.
And they don't know how it's going to work, but it just does, and it happened. It worked.
It's crazy, and we're better off for it. I think that one of the things that people don't really understand when it comes to just being an audience member are the little things that come into play. This is a machine with so many complicated parts. Once it has the Nolan stamp of approval on there, it's gone from being a jalopy that can like move down the road to a Lamborghini that's going to have to make it really, really tight and fast. Because if it doesn't, then the entire thing is going to fall apart. What do you think was probably the biggest challenge as being on set and dealing with things? Was it having to make that 16-hour day and then having to make call at like 5 a.m. the next morning? Or was it something more low-key that, if it wasn't for your experience, you wouldn't have been able to deal with as well, or anything along those lines?
For the record, it was 3 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah, so we'd get our call time would be 3 o'clock in the morning, and then we'd get home, if we were lucky, at about 8 p.m.
Dude,
back to our hotel.
That's intense.
That was it Monday to Friday, like every single day.
That's
for
intense.
3 or 4 weeks. For 23.
It's a party.
For real. Absolutely.
But I think one of the most difficult things was the final climax of the movie was the last part that they filmed for the movie. And so you have literally and it was also the most climactic. It had this massive set that was the size of a small city. That was amazing.
Was it shot in California? Or did you guys? I mean, you just said you got on a bus and everything. Okay, cool.
Yeah, this was near Palm Springs, about an hour and a half away from Palm Springs.
Wicked.
It was a little dinky town, mining town that had like collapsed or whatever.
Perfect.
In Eagle Mountain, you can look it up. It looks like a post-war apocalypse kind of town.
That's badass. That's great.
But yeah, it was about an hour and a half away from Palm Springs. But it was just and you'd get there at 4 in the morning, and it would be freezing cold. It would be like 40 degrees or something, and then at noon or at 1 o'clock, it would be like 98 degrees.
Yeah, you're shooting in a desert. It's got to be really physical. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, you have the incredible production design of all these military vehicles that are everywhere. You have 4 Chinook helicopters flying overhead constantly. They're just going and going.
Man.
And then you've got, you know, special effects, practical effects. You got explosions, and
I would have paid just to see the production. I mean, that's one thing that Robert and I both talked about after seeing the movie. We were like, you know what, the movie was great, but we would have paid for tickets to see, like, on the day, like how things were shot and how things were put together. It's intense. What we have to do, though, is kind of like color what's happening in the movie for people who maybe need a little bit of a reminder. What's going on with the protagonist is that after the scene in the opera, he is captured. He takes a cyanide capsule, which ends up being fake because it was all a test. And then this organization called Tenet, which we find out later in the movie, big spoilers here, that the protagonist is actually the one that started it somehow by some sort of weird time loop or whatever. I don't want to spoil everything. Well, I do want to spoil everything, but don't look at me like that, Robert. You know I always destroy everything for people. I warned them. Anyway, as the action moves forward and backwards in time, there's a lot of great characters that are put into play. We have, like I mentioned before, Pattinson, who plays Neil, who ends up being, the protagonist, Guy Friday. We have a number of SWAT officers that were this team that got killed that ended up being really good technical workers. We have Dimple Kapadia, who played Priya, a gun and arms distribution specialist. We have the legendary Michael Caine, who I think should just be a regular in all of Nolan's movies forever. Is he in every one? I thought he was. I thought he started in Batman, but then he moved forward from there. Was he? He wasn't like a Memento or anything like that, was he?
Not Memento. No.
No, I think Batman Begins is the beginning of their on-screen relationship. But
still, ridiculous. I mean, we're talking about like Elizabeth Debicki, who played Kat, who was the wife of Sator, and I cannot tell you how happy I was to see Kenneth Branagh playing a Bond villain with an incredible Russian accent. I mean,
yes.
It's not Henry V, but god dang, it's good.
Yeah, you can't call him a Bond villain. You can just call him a villain, but you can't call him a Bond villain. You can call him a Bond-like villain.
Okay, you're right. Copyright. I apologize.
This is protagonist.
But anyway, after going through and having the establishment of the main bad guy, we then get an idea of the whole story, where Kenneth Branagh's character is actually being supplied by some unknown agency or unknown force in the future to disrupt the present by taking these weapons and doing this, what they call an inversion process, which then allow weapons and people to be manipulated by the flow of time in different ways. And it just ends up in this huge, great climax of a fighting scene where we have just beautiful shots of this town that you were talking about, Gabe, multiple parts moving back and forth and time moving back and forth, where given the perspective of the character that we're doing the over-the-shoulder shot from and the 1v1s, we can see the surrounding area moving in reverse while they're moving forward. It's a ridiculous aspect of just, honestly, these are like old techniques that people are using. They're just reversing time, given the way in which it was shot. People being, looked at by doing things in reverse and then reversing it back and forth. But I love it that Nolan, and he did this with Inception in smaller parts. Obviously, when you have like the whole skyscraper landscape of like New York and Paris folding in on itself, that's a CGI miracle. Here, I was so happy to see that they just did really competent technical work. There wasn't like, a CGI alien coming out or anything. It was just really technically brilliant filmmaking.
From what Nolan said, I believe he only had a handful of CGI elements in the entirety of the film.
Yeah. Well, it must be hard to have cars crashing. Well, they did in The Matrix, but not a Nolan film, obviously. But I mean, when you look at the my cat breaking my kitchen. When you look at like these huge expansive shots, and then all you have to do is diamond cut a little bit, and you see just this brilliant technical stuff pop up. That's what was really refreshing to me. It helped me forget the fact that barely anything was explained, and that like this movie. Well, Gabe, you don't know this, but Andrus and I have one cardinal sin when it comes to the movies that we look at. If we, as audience members, have to fill in the gaps when it comes to the narrative, that's one thing that we really hate that movies do sometimes. But Nolan committed to this to the point of not giving the lead character a name, not really specifically telling us what organization he's really working for, not giving a name to the dark organization that's sending things back to the past and that stuff. There are so many questions with this movie. So I wanted to ask your opinion about that specifically because it's a huge part of the narrative of the film. Do you think the fact that people had so many questions about what was going on was a pro or a con when it came to overall enjoyment of this film?
I mean, obviously, I think it depends on who you ask.
Sure.
In terms of like if somebody would enjoy it depends on, you know, if what their preferences are. For me in particular, I kind of enjoy and appreciate that fact as far as his artistry comes.
Okay.
Particularly because I feel like when it comes to Hollywood films right now, especially blockbusters, it's so cut and dry, easy.
That's true.
Like, I'm just gonna spoon feed you literally all. I'm gonna like slap you in the face with exposition,
right?
So that you can't not understand it, right?
Right.
And I for one, as an artist, like appreciated the effort that Chris Nolan went through to be like, you know, like I'm okay with you asking questions. I'm okay with you not getting everything, but you're still going to enjoy what I'm showing you.
Well, I really enjoyed the shininess of it. Like these shots blew me away. And like coming from like a sound design perspective, just the way in which they had to make everything work in sync with everything that was happening. I mean, I can't applaud enough the technical direction behind it. I don't like having so many questions that I have to, I mean, literally, I have to watch this movie 3 more times in order to get everything set in my head. But I guess there is value to that because it does definitely give some room for people to have their own interpretation. It's just I don't know, you make a really good point. It's a fine line between being spoon-fed what the director and the teams want you to think versus your impressions of the art that's being pushed before you. Andrus, do you have that same attitude? Like, were there too many holes in this? Or do you think it was like this refreshing new take on the way in which we can digest narrative?
Watching it for the 47th time.
Okay.
Not that many times. I don't have that much spare time.
You're terrible.
But watching it the first time compared to watching it every other time, there's just more information that you get that you can process that then you can wrap your head around in order to do. So as far as a first time watch, it made no sense. It was just a cool action movie.
Right.
By the end of it, it made enough sense that you could go back in your thought process and go, okay, that made sense. That made sense. That made sense. That made sense.
There was that scene with Washington and Pattinson where Pattinson says that beautiful line where like my mission was the end of a beautiful friendship, and like Washington, you could see there's tears in his eyes. Like that kind of hit me really well.
There were some really great moments all the way through it, and as far as an action movie, it stands on its 2 feet very, very steadily.
Gotcha.
But as far as filling in the blanks, like you said, Gabe, the fact that Nolan just drags you like busting through walls, going through whatever the story he wants to tell, so you don't have time to think or catch up or whatever. It's an amazing roller coaster ride, but I'm also wanting to find out the story and fill the story and go through the story. And it's really interesting because I rewatched it again today prior to this, and I didn't make it all the way through. I ran out of time, but there were just little tidbits of things that just hit that were so beautiful. First time we're introduced to DeBecky's character.
Yes.
She's talking about this moment that she has with her husband on a boat.
DeBecky does such a great job of just having this minimalist way of acting, I think. I mean, I've seen other brilliant actors, not to say that, it's a bad choice to be so physical with emotion and that kind of stuff. It's something that we see in theater a lot because it's just the medium. You have to move your face a lot. You have to do all this kind of stuff. DeBecky did such a good job with her character, Kat, of being able to show how much pain this woman was in with just like these deliveries of these lines. I mean, I'm not.
It was so minimal in the beginning, and by the end of it, you just feel
exactly. Well, when she pushes her husband off the end of the boat, and you see his head cracked open, and then like it just breaks at his neck and everything. It goes from like 50 to like 500 in that situation, and she's just such a. I don't think that after watching this movie, I'm definitely going to look into other things that she's done because I'm interested to see how actors who take that kind of technique. And push that forward as their way of contributing to the narrative. I really find that very interesting. How you can do so much with so little. Well, not so little, but with. Well, you guys know what I mean. Hopefully, Gabe. When we talk about like this, though, I mean your scene and the work that you did was anything but minimal. You were being shot in the climax. You have bombs going off. You have, like you mentioned, these huge helicopters coming through. So many effects and stuff from a practical standpoint. That, I mean, honestly, you got to have your head in a swivel in that kind of environment. I mean, was there any time that you were maybe scared or anything like that? I mean, like besides being just like regularly nervous about having this ordnance being put around you, was there ever a moment where like maybe a tank came out right in front of you and you're like, oh, it's a good thing I didn't step forward at that moment, otherwise my acting career would be over, amongst other things? Actually,
yes. Funny you should say that. So first of all, like the bombs exploding next to me, you've got like flash pans, right next to my head. There's shrapnel, which is like rubber pieces, hitting me in the face or whatever.
Oh my God.
I just ate that up like candy.
Yeah,
I was this is amazing. Like 10-year-old me is like freaking out right now.
Well, you have an experience with that too. I mean, I want to not only for being a guest on the show, but like you are. This must be like mother's milk to you. You have a background when it comes to like scene fighting. You are a stunt man. Like when I was talking about like you being a well-rounded actor and us being really just in a good place to have you talk with us today, I wasn't kidding. I mean, looking at your resume, it's big, but that little kid in you must have been eating the stuff up then. I mean, you have like ordnance and everything going through.
Absolutely. It was a dream come true, especially because I grew up loving Christopher Nolan since I saw The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Every single movie that's come out, since I saw The Dark Knight and Inception. Like Inception is by far one of my favorite movies of all time.
Great movie.
So nice. To be on set here and then to be doing something which is one of the coolest things I've ever done. it's like where do I go next?
Oh, that's great. That's great. Exactly right. Have you had to ask yourself that question? Like last day, scenes cut, everybody, they check the camera for everything and get last looks. What's your feeling when you realize that wow, this once in a lifetime experience, something that you hope to replicate, hopefully again in the future, but now it's over and you have to go back home. What's going through your mind after everything is taken care of?
I mean, typically I'd be extremely not disappointed, but sad and heartbroken that it was over.
Yeah.
But honestly, the fact that I got to spend 24 days on set,
that's a great attitude.
Day in, day out. It's especially because I'm still. I mean, you're talking me up a lot, but honestly, I'm still very young, especially in terms of Los Angeles acting. I'm very young in my experience.
Sure.
Out here. For me to be able to be with the big dogs,
for real,
it's like, what? How did I get here? It's incredible. And so I wasn't ever disappointed. And I mean, I say like we had 3 a.m. call times and 16-hour days, Monday through Friday or whatever. I think the greatest thing for me is that there wasn't a second that I did not like what was happening in terms of
that's so rare, but that's so cool. That's so very cool.
I get to get up tomorrow at like 2:30 in the morning and do this again. Like it's that was a huge thing for me. And so like it was honestly a dream come true. And I'll be chasing that high for a long time.
Well, if anything,
hopefully you're gonna do it over and over and over and over again.
Hopefully. I mean, if anything, like if it were me, like there's a lot of psychology into being an actor. It has to deal with so much, I imagine, with like your own self-confidence and what you have to do. And also actors are the most vulnerable people that I've ever met in my life too. And there takes a certain amount of bravery for that, I think. And I really like the idea that not only is this going to, push you to like chase that high, but I think there's something to be said about the fact that you did make it, that you did have the capability of being able to get there and have that experience. And it's because you work hard. And that's a lesson for a lot of people, regardless if they're actors or not, to kind of fall behind and do what they can. Did you happen to put on a mask and don a hazmat suit and give yourself the treat of seeing this in the theater, or did you have to watch it when you at home in the living room and that kind of thing?
I did actually see it in theater the day that it came out. I wanted to see it in IMAX because
absolutely
I usually have to. And I met up with a few of my friends that I made on set.
I want to talk about that too, but please go on.
Yeah. Los Angeles is about 4 hours away from Las Vegas, which was like the closest movie theaters that were open at the time.
Wicked.
And so I went to Las Vegas.
Golly, I love that. That's awesome.
We watched it, and we watched it in IMAX, and it was fantastic. I mean, we all just like stood in the lobby right after and just talked about like, oh, do you remember this part? Or like,
oh
yo,
my
remember
gosh,
that or whatever. So that was also another dream come true. Like not only being on the set, but like the whole reason I moved from Utah to Los Angeles was to be a part of amazing like blockbuster stories.
Yeah.
And not that Utah doesn't have them, but it's just the frequency in Los Angeles is
oh yeah, yeah, no question. Right. No question.
And that was just like, it was like the biggest thing was just telling me after being in Los Angeles for a year of like, okay, I'm in the right direction. I'm heading where I want to go. This is what I want to keep doing.
Because that's got to be another kind of goblin on your back too, right? I mean, like I wasn't kidding when I said it's like the hardest job in the world because, like you mentioned, momentum is key, and especially during this year and probably for the next 8 months or so from the time of this recording, that's gonna be a big question on the back of your mind, the mind of other actors as well. What is it about this specific success that kind of outshines the other stuff that you've done, if that's an appropriate way to take it? Like, do you think that like this will be how can I put this, like a jumping off point to do bigger and better things, or do you think it's going to be a situation where now you're going to have these next jobs? Because I think the idea of you having momentum is absolutely key, and I think it's something that you've been able to harness and your capability to speak to that. But is it going to be a launching pad, or do you think it's going to be something that you're always going to compromise every other job to? Not compromise, compare, excuse me.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. Because
I'm full of them.
I think the only answer I can give is that every job is so completely different, and every job has its own benefits, its own thing, like its own perks or its own, fun things that I gravitate towards, especially as I try to pursue more and more stunt work.
Yeah.
It's just me playing, hopefully I won't get hurt, but if I do, whatever. But like, it's just, I don't think it'll be fair to compare to Tenet and being on that set, because it was just it's like
such a unicorn, right? It's such a unicorn.
Oh, exactly. But like, I mean, like it'll definitely it's again, it's something I'll look back on and just think like, I am so glad, like I could, who knows where I'll be in 5 years, who knows where I'll be in 10 years, but that is something I'll always have to look back to and be like, that happened, that was a day that my dreams came true.
Yeah, that has to have an immense amount of value for any creative, I think, going forward in their career and their life and everything. One thing that I did want to touch on, like I mentioned before, was the idea of community. I remember back in the day, one of the very first independent films that I did, it was a very small crew, like a dozen people. And it was like this beautiful film by a director named Lee Isaac Chung, who has moved on. And it's also, another individual who was able to sharpen his chops here in Utah on the film circuit. But what happened was that there was this intimate project, and it was just me and the main sound guy. I was a boom operator and sound assistant on it. But the relationships that you make by working as hard as you have to and spending all your time with these people is something that's still very meaningful to me. I still keep in touch with some of the people that I worked with, and this was, a decade ago or so. How important do you think it is to abolish? And it might be a bit impossible, maybe. I mean, again, my inner cynic kind of comes out in regards to this question. But how important do you think it is to abolish negativity and do what you can to embrace the community of people that are trying to find one goal? I mean, you mentioned before you guys were in a hotel room. You had to stay there because of quarantine and everything. And then for 16 hours a day for the next week, everybody was working towards one goal. What kind of friendships did you make along the lines, and how important is it for an actor to keep those things positive when it comes to their career?
I think it's one of the most, I mean, obviously networking is
For
a
sure.
huge key when it comes to this. I think it was important to me because I had just moved to Los Angeles January of 2019, and I started filming this in October.
It's crazy.
And so I still like hadn't made a lot of friends in Los Angeles. And some of the people that I met on this set, I consider my best friends today, and we still hang out and see each other. Well, as much as you can.
For sure.
In quarantine, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's an amazing thing, and some of the crew people, I still am in contact with, and somebody I just who's also a photographer. I just did some like photos with them, and it's just like it's incredibly important because like we all are hopefully in this industry because we love it.
Yeah.
We want to create. We want to move on to the next really cool thing, and so why not help each other and continue each other's dreams, as much as we can or whatever. But that being said, I think it's also, there's something to be said about honoring the negative aspects of production.
What do you mean?
Well.
What do you mean when you say that?
I think it's important not to go into denial of optimism 100%. Everything is hunky-dory, because there will be productions that suck. There will be people that suck. And it's important to acknowledge, like, okay, this was a bad production. I didn't like this, and identify what aspect you didn't like and why you didn't like it, and then see if it's something that you can maybe control for the future, or something that you can, look to the future and be like, oh,
something you can learn from, maybe.
Yeah, something you can learn from. Something that, because I mean, there's going to be, if you're working in this industry, hopefully there will be more and more films and projects. And then you can maybe see some warning signs for future projects of things that you don't want to be involved in.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's value in the positivity, but there's also lessons to learn in the negativity that'll help you guide yourself through to the next project.
It's great advice. We're going to move on to like the final part of the show, and what we do usually is just talk about specializations. I usually lean really hard on Andrus in regards to this because I'm not an actor, and then luckily he comes back to me and asks, "Well, what do you think of the sound?" and that kind of thing. But now that we have a fresh perspective, I definitely want to open that up to you as well. But Andrus, from like a casting perspective, from like a situation where you have so many moving parts, what'd you think of like the the chemistry that we saw between the actors here, and how that was able to be integrated into the narrative?
Well, you never know how it's going to turn out. So, until you do chemistry tests and get the two actors on set and see what they're capable of pulling together. But I think they've got a really good team. I think I was lucky enough at one of the Sundance Directors Labs to work with J.D. Washington, and he was such an amazing human being.
That's
nice,
so cool.
Down to earth, just super humble. You come to find out that he's got Hollywood royalty in his family.
Right.
But on the flip side of it, I've had one interaction with Robert Pattinson as well, because we cast a movie that he starred in called Damsel several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one interaction that I had with him, which was we shared eyes from across the room while we were walking to do a casting session, and he was in another room working with his co-star.
Right.
So, I mean, literally, that's all I have to go on from him. But,
okay.
But he's a vampire, so who cares?
Right.
No, it's
he's the vampire.
It's one of those things where, because I've had this reality check of who these people are, would I ever put them together as a buddy cop situation, fighting the end of the world? No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think it totally worked. And I think it totally worked because of their experience, their know-how, and their dedication to what the story is.
Right.
They have a lot more intimate knowledge of what the story is than what we get as the audience members. And for me, that's a little bit of a mind job. But in this circumstance, I thought that they were terrific as a partnership. I thought Kenneth Branagh was a terrific partner for everybody that he was in a scene with.
I think that the work that he did with Elizabeth Debicki was really good. You could almost see like I kind of dive into that a little bit more than maybe I should, but you could definitely tell these people loved each other at one point, and then just through terrible situations they ended up hating each other.
Well, and I still think that love is still there. It's just what takes over.
Sure.
But I would go down the line to everybody. And I mean, there were a lot of actors in here that are really established actors that only got a scene or two.
Yeah.
Michael Caine.
Absolutely.
Right. Martin Donovan,
yes.
who I think was terrific in the scene that he had, or the couple scenes that he had. But there were so many things in here that I could talk about how amazing the acting was and everything else. But I think it really comes down to everybody did their job. And I think that there were some things that maybe if I was directing, I would choose to see things differently.
Sure.
But not being in that position, I don't know that I could change anything, because who am I talking about, really?
Yeah. I
mean,
respect.
he's a master at what he does. He has a vision and a reason to do everything that he did.
That's a thing too. Like, that's a caveat that I know we have to take more often, because it's not like I'm writing Oscar award-winning scripts, every other day or anything like that. The amount of hard work that everybody pushed through, present company included, of course, must have been monumental. And take our words with a grain of salt, everybody. We're just offering your opinion as much as we can from our experiences and what we can talk about. That's a really good point, Andrus. I mean, like, putting yourself into somebody's shoes is so much easier to say, but when you have the kind of background that we have and know how hard people have to work, it means a completely different thing when you think about the kind of challenges people are dealing with. But they came off with a really good film at the very least. Yeah, go ahead, Andrus. Sorry.
I was going to say there were a couple surprises for me along the way, and one of them was it Priya?
The arms salesman.
I don't know that I've ever seen her in anything, and I thought that she was.
Dimple Kapadia is pretty well known when it comes to like the Bollywood circuit, I guess, for lack of a better term. She's done a lot of work when it comes to TV series that are coming out of that part of the world. She just finished a series called Anuradha Kishore. I know I'm probably butchering that, but her profile is intense. And to speak to what you mentioned before, that's the entire supporting cast. Everybody here has more than just one specialization. Everybody here is very well-rounded. And when you're dealing with a Nolan film that's as technically and narratively complex as this one, I don't think there's any other way that you can go.
I think it's also interesting to point out that John David Washington's character had literally nothing to go off of in terms of who he was, like who this person is.
For sure.
He doesn't even literally have a name.
His name is Protagonist.
The Protagonist.
Yeah,
that's
for
like
sure.
Self-dubbed, self-proclaimed, like, this is who I am now. I am the Protagonist.
Yeah.
A character with
what a power move.
And also make a character that can connect with the audience because they're the protagonists.
Yes.
So I think the special note to that is like that was I think he did a great job with making some kind of connection based on literally we didn't know anything about.
For sure.
He's a superhero. I mean, there it is.
It's true.
Yeah.
Speaking in regards to like characterization and that kind of thing too, I want to put out the question to you, Gabe, because you, like what we mentioned about before, and I promise I'll stop pumping up your ego as soon as we're done recording. But
it's okay. He likes it.
Nice, yeah. Your specializations are amongst a lot of different fields here when it comes to being, an actor's actor, like I mentioned before. Now that you've been able to see the man behind the curtain, in a sense, you've had, this experience with one of the, if not the, definitely of 2020, one of the biggest blockbusters in the world. How does that affect you as an audience member? Now that you've been able to, you know the secret recipe in a sense, right? You're able to see the stuff that happens behind the scenes. Does that affect you as a consumer of this medium?
I think it's interesting because, especially when I first got on the set, I was basically like deer in the headlights and looking at all this amazing things and helicopters, military vehicles,
right? All
these people and everything, and oh my gosh, there's Chris Nolan right there. Holy crap! And I think it was amazing how easily the rose tinted glasses flew off my face, and I realized how like just regular production it was. Just like other feature films I had done.
Was that refreshing? Did that kind of like calm you down a little bit after you're able to see? Oh, okay, I've seen these tricks before. I know where I can fit in this puzzle.
Yes, but in another sense, it was scary as hell.
Oh, for sure.
Because Chris Nolan is probably the scariest person I've ever met in my life. Just because he's so intense, and I'm sure it's because it's like, you know, literally it's thousands of dollars per minute on set or whatever. But I heard him get pissed off so often on set, on the radios, just like swearing at people. He like yelled at me and my team and swore at us and stuff. And like, you know, like if you screwed up, like you wouldn't hear about it. And then it was awesome to hear other people on the crew talk back to Chris Nolan a little bit, a little cheap or whatever, because he'd call them out on something and they'd be like, no, Chris, we're doing that because this and this and this, like we talked about.
Oh, wow.
Chris? Wow. It's like we're on the radio. Like,
you're like on both ends. It's like, wait a minute, what?
What's gonna happen?
That's crazy.
So that's one thing that I take back to with as far as like an audience member is like, you imagine like, oh my gosh, like to be on set, it's like this magical experience, and it is. But just as much, these are like very much filmmakers like you know experience. If you experience life on set, very very similar. But again, I would very much still be afraid to see Chris Nolan in front of me and like, you know, make sure I'm like posture is great or something.
I feel you.
Talking a British accent, try to impress him.
Absolutely. No, I think everybody would be that. I know I definitely would.
I think you should do that. I think
from next time,
arrange that meeting and talk to Christopher Nolan.
Hello, Mr. Nolan. My name is Gabriel. We've met before.
Hello, Chris. Right through me.
That's awesome. I think from a sound aspect, I mean, this film was technically ridiculously rich. I'm going to watch it on more than one occasion just to try and glean some stuff, maybe learn something from it. When you have two different timelines and events that are moving towards a different end point, but are both moving at the same time, the potential for mess-ups is universal. And the fact that even though like most of these sound effects were in real-world effects, Andrus and I have had this conversation before where when you have a very wide sound palette from like, you know, fantasy films or science fiction or something like that, that can sometimes be a curse in and of itself. But then when you have like a little more of a micro view when it comes to the genre, granted this was a science fiction film, but it took place in a real world that had to live by real rules, that can sometimes be thought of as being limiting, but I kind of like it because it gives you more of a structure when it comes to like, you know, the final mix, what you want to accomplish. With this, I was ridiculously impressed by just the way in which everything made sense, because you're taking two genres and just mashing them together from a soundscape perspective, and just the way that it came off so meticulously. I will be learning from this film for years to come for sure, and it was a joy to watch, and I was so very happy to have been able to see it, regardless of like my feelings about the narrative and everything. I think that everybody who is trying to do anything with film should watch this movie, if just from a technical standpoint alone. So,
did you ever have any issue with the mixing in terms of the voices and sound effects and music at the same time while you were watching it?
Well, granted, I was monitoring it from my TV, so unfortunately, getting that kind of source audio can be a little mixing. I would have loved to have seen it in the theater to get like a really good idea of how hard they were trying to push the explosions versus the vocals and everything. Hopefully, maybe. I mean, Chris Nolan has a lot of pull. Maybe they'll re-release it for a theater release so that we can all enjoy it the way that it was meant to be.
I'm sure they will. Yeah. I mean, look at what they've done during the COVID situation.
For sure. Well, we can always hope.
I think all they did was they recorded the audio and then played it backwards, and things were going backwards, and then they played it forward again.
But then they had to have the time machine to remix everything from Abbey Road,
and then just play it forward, play it back to the end.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah, everything's so simple.
I mean,
if only everything was so simple. But you know what? Honestly, competent. I bet that is how it happens, Rob. I bet that's probably how things were processed accordingly. And why not? But anyway, guys, I cannot thank you both enough for giving me some time today. We've reached the end of the episode, and by all means, I want to give a big round of applause to our special guest, Thank you so very much, Gabe. We know your time is important, and we do really appreciate you giving us just a wonderful opinion and an honest attitude in regards to what it means to be an actor's actor, and just being able to actually enjoy the process. And we wish you the best of luck going forward, and really hope that, we wish you all the success in the world. And, when you have, you mentioned 5 years from now, maybe you can come back to the show and let us know even more about like how things are going on from your perspective. Really do appreciate your time, and thank you very much for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was an absolute blast. It was great to relive some of those memories and talk about it with you guys.
Awesome. Andrus,
we appreciate you.
We absolutely do. Andrus, as always, man, thank you so very much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for keeping this up and doing this with me. When we have great conversations like this, it makes it all worth it. And I really appreciate you, man. Thank you so very much.
Back at you.
Sir.
And I've got something to say.
Yeah.
Look, Satan. It was cool.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I had to throw in one more.
Anyway.
I've been like dying to say that for like the last hour and a half.
You're killing me. You're killing me, dude.
It was cool.
All right. Well, duly noted. But moving forward,
hey, what do you have to say?
I really want to say thank you to everybody who happens to be listening. If it's still the original 10 subscribers that we had, a month ago, or if it's even more, maybe people are going back in time, playing this in reverse and listening to it in real time, so that will affect their presence for like an extra panache. Who knows? But bottom line is, if you are hearing the sounds of our wonderful voices, it means you're taking time out of your day to hear what we have to say. And we have a common situation with that, because we may be wrong, but it's your job to tell us. Feel free to comment in the YouTube video, like and subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud, email us, pullfocuspod@gmail.com, and become part of the conversation. We're just happy to have you, and we're happy to talk to you, and we're happy to hear you. And also, really quick before we call it cuts, it is the year of COVID. We do see a horizon, but we're still in the thick of it. So if you happen to be any individual, any kind of healthcare worker, anybody who is delivering food or just trying to not be a bad person during a time where it's really easy to be really negative, we applaud you, we salute you, and we thank you every day. Keep a stiff upper lip and do what you can to make every day better, and we'll do it with you. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Grazie.
Oh boy.
Thank you.